Hello everyone and welcome back to another Fate video. Today, I will be atoning for my negativity in the previous series of Top 10 Worst by now talking about the opposite. That's right, today I will be discussing the Top 10 Best 1 to 3 star servants in FGO currently. Now, I have done a video somewhat similar to this in the past with my Who to Level First video, so be sure to check that out as well. However, while some things will be similar, there is more to work with in this topic. We will be analyzing skills, abilities, stats, and noble phantasms, and then stack them up against their competition to see who is the very best. Keep in mind that this is not a waifu husbando tier list, so while some of the picks may seem biased, I assure you they are not. Also, after playtesting more with some of these characters, with their buffs on JP, the results here also differ from my 1 to 3 star tier list video. Oh yeah, this is also a JP friendly list, so all of that will be taken into account. What I am mostly looking for from these characters is how well they perform across all aspects of the game. Essentially, would I bring these characters even if I had higher level options, or do they perform a role that is absolutely vital in the game that makes them broken? Finally, same rules as the worst 10, all of the budget options are being judged at MP5 and 10-10-10. That's enough rambling, let's get to the top 10 best 1 to 3 star servants in FGO. Now, an ongoing theme that you will notice for this list is that most of the characters will be supports, or have support capabilities. Here's why. The longer you play FGO, unless you are purposefully avoiding ever rolling anything that is not the free-to-play gacha, you will accumulate better damage servants. Better options are locked behind their budget attack and HP stats. Now, because of this design philosophy, that means that they can break budget options a bit more in the skill department. This is incredibly true for the support units. Because they are weak, they have to be usable in some way. For a DPS servant to stand out, they have to really stand out. So, with that in mind, number 10 is Uriel. Let me say this up front, this spot could easily be filled by Robin as well, and stands more so to personal preference, but in my experience from the early to late game, Uriel remains consistently more usable than Robin, albeit by a very slim margin. And I have had this discussion in previous videos already, so I'll spare you all the rehash on that. Uriel is a monster of a unit, a single target arts unit that specializes in the complete annihilation of male enemies. Her main claim to fame is being a key in stall/charm lock setups, as well as being almost essential in the clearing of the Camelot Singularity, effectively nullifying some boss fights. Let's look at her skills. She is interesting in that she has received no buffs to her skills since her release, and in fact has only had an NP upgrade to output better damage. Her first skill is Vampirism, draining the enemy's NP gauge by 1 and filling hers for 27% on a 6-turn cooldown. Her second skill is Siren Song, with a 100% chance to charm a male enemy on a 7-turn cooldown. Finally, she has Whim of a Goddess, a 30% arts buff that lasts for 3 turns on a 5-turn cooldown, meaning that this will be up for most of the fight. Normally, I do not talk passives because they only add a little bump, but she has 2 very powerful ones, both of which help out her damage substantially. Those being Goddess's Essence EX, which adds a flat 300 damage to all of her attacks, and increases her debuff resist by 30%. Her other notable passive is Independent Action A+, which increases her crit damage by 11%. All of this is to say that her arts crits hit hard. Her damage goes through the roof if you are fighting a male enemy because of her NP. She has a single target arts NP that does 250% bonus damage to male enemies, decreases their attack by 20% for 3 turns, and has at minimum a 100% chance to charm them. She is a manslayer in the literal sense of the phrase. In an ideal situation, you will bring her to fight male sabers and berserkers. She is incredibly effective in that role. She is less so against non-male enemies, but still very good due to her being a heavy-hitting arts unit. She is the gold star in her niche of being an anti-male archer, outclassing the likes of Artemis, who is a 5-star. I will admit that she does struggle in some areas though, that being against non-males and long cooldowns on her first and second skills. Honestly, she is 1 buff away from becoming clearly superior to Robin. I see a point in the future where both Uriel and Steno receive a buff much in the line with their sister Medusa Lily, where their Siren Song cooldown gets reduced by 1, and they've reduced the resist of their NP type by 20% for 3 turns. This fits both in a thematic sense, since they are so diehard on the quick Arts Buster NP thing for flavor. So, mark my words, it'll happen. Number 9 is the handsome lad and photographer Georgius, or as I will be calling him, George. Before you slaughter me for not having him higher, allow me to explain myself. George is an absolutely fantastic unit. This is undeniable. Despite his unassuming appearance, he has never once received a buff, and in a way, he does not need one. He is one of the very few true tanks in FGO alongside Mosh, Leonidas, and Daeon. Truthfully, in terms of just raw tankage, he is the best. His first skill is a 3-turn taunt on a 5-turn cooldown that also bumps his defense by 40%. This is, without a doubt, one of the best skills in the game. It gives all of your other units 3 turns to either build up buffs for one massive attack or focus down the enemy without worrying about them getting hurt. Essentially, he is what enables berserkers to get max damage out without worrying about them being one-shot too early. His other 2 skills are simply tools to make sure he can effectively live through these 3 turns. His second skill is a 2000 HP heal with a 100% mental debuff resist for 3 turns on a 5-turn cooldown. His third skill is a standard Guts, reviving him with 2500 HP on a 7-turn cooldown. If there were a buff to any of his skills, it would be this one, likely adding an effect that procs after Guts is activated like a party-wide debuff removal or a heal. A fun buff for that would be to inflict the dragon trait to all enemies and increase the party's damage against dragons, but that's all just me having fun. His NP is a single target arts NP that makes the enemy a dragon and then increases George's defense with overcharge. All in all, he's a very simple unit, but very effective. He has one job: stand in front of the enemy, get hit, stall for time, use that 1 CE that charges the party's NP when he dies, or his Bond CE, which further reinforces his role. George is the best at what he does, and what he does is very important for certain comps and quests in the game. The one thing that keeps him from being higher on this list is his class. He, unfortunately, is a member of the Rider class, which gives him a key flaw. He has great star absorption. This means that if you want to use him on a crit team as a line of defense, your main DPS better have a solid star absorb. Otherwise, George is eating them all. This is a huge problem as the game has become much more crit-oriented as the story progresses, making servants who are able to crit hard the ones at the top of the DPS chain. But honestly, this is the only flaw to an otherwise amazing character. DW gave us the animation update, now Lasagna has to give us the summer outfit. Number 8 is going to be our very own shooting star, Arash. Let me start this off with saying that they need to use him more as a character. I am aware of how much of a badass he is in Prototype, and it is alluded to a fair amount in FGO as well, with the ever-arrogant Ozymandias remarking that Arash is one of the few warriors he truly respects. He is a lot like Tawara Toda in this regard. Both are instantly recognized by others for their great achievements and how amazing they are, but then they never use them in content. Side tangent, sorry. Arash is much like George, in that he does one thing, and he does that one thing very well. You bring Arash to a fight to clear a wave of enemies, and then immediately swap in a better unit without expending too many resources. He is perfect for clearing that wave of enemies right before a boss fight, protecting all of your units from unnecessary damage. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Arash's first 2 skills do not matter. They are Toughness, which increases his defense by 20%, and Poison Resist by 160%, both for 3 turns on a 5-turn cooldown. His second skill is Clairvoyance, which increases his star drop rate by 40% for 3 turns on a 6-turn cooldown. His third skill is Arrow Construction, which is a 30% NP charge and a 3000 HP heal on a 6-turn cooldown. This can be used in tandem with a Kaleidoscope, or, with the new Servant Coin system, he can bump his damage up even more with a 50% starting NP CE that bumps up his Buster damage, NP damage, or both. I don't usually bring up the coin skills because of how much you have to put into them for them to work, but he is a servant who very much benefits from having the mana loading one. Arash's claim to fame is his NP. It is a massive AoE buster nuke that deals damage comparable to a single target NP's, but then goes even further beyond with the overcharge dealing additional damage to anyone that survives. The trade-off is that this kills Arash, guaranteed, as Guts will not save him. This makes the Demonic Bodhisattva CE incredible on him if you level mana loading. This is all that Arash does, and it is incredibly powerful. He is the peak wave removing servant. His one job is to clear a wave, leave, and make room for somebody else. It may seem bad to be a man down in a fight, but if this is your strategy, then you should already have planned ahead for it. But this is something that should not be ignored. The trade-off of not expending main resources for a wave is one servant slot. While this may not matter for things such as farming, for other content like challenge or story quests, this can be a problem. This is the only issue with him, that to work, he must die. Mind you, this is also a great thing, allowing you to strategically rotate in and out servants as needed. It allows for you to do a number of unique comps. Arash is great and should always be one of the first servants that you level once you're starting FGO. Number 7, we have my favorite longman, Paracelsus. He is a unit that I underestimated for a very long time. However, if you are like me and are starved for most of the top tier supports, Paracelsus is a godsend. He is the very best budget art support in the game, and is a unit I use to this day in my farming comps with Berserker Musashi and Space Ishtar. But let's look at what he's packing. To start, he has rapid casting, which will charge his NP by 80%. Note that this, like Arash, fits in well with the servant coins, allowing for him to get his NP off turn 1 at max rank. This skill is unfortunately on an 8-turn cooldown, so for most of the fight you will only use it once, which in all honesty is all you need. His second skill is Elemental, which is a party-wide 20% art up for 3 turns on a 7-turn cooldown. His third skill is Philosopher's Stone, which is a targetable guts with a 3-turn NP generation buff of 50% on an 8-turn cooldown. This is the skill that puts Paracelsus on this list. Targetable guts is fantastic on its own, but it's the bonus NP generation that enables other units to shine. This skill is what pushes some servants over the edge so that they can loop effectively. As somebody who will attempt to get Castoria and will fail if my Scotty luck is anything to go off of, Paracelsus is a fine budget replacement. He is not nearly as flashy and powerful, but he is amazing at what he does for farming teams. He can even be used for farming himself, as he has an AoE Arts NP that also reduces the enemy attack, though honestly, this NP does terrible damage and is really best used as a backup more than anything while your main farmer goes off. I am comfortable with him being placed here rather than higher or lower, as he is very versatile, but does quickly become outclassed as you climb the star ladder. I think a good buff for him would be to his second skill to increase NP damage for one ally for 3 turns, as this would nestle him in very nicely into his current niche. Number 6 is the little man himself, Caesar. He is the most versatile budget saber and one of the hardest hitting single target members of his class. His skills at first may seem vanilla, but sometimes simple is best. Caesar is all about damage, be it in the form of crits or his NP. Let's take a look. His first skill is Military Tactics, a party-wide NP buff for 18% for 1 turn. His second skill is a Charisma for 16% on a 5-turn cooldown. His third skill is a targetable 40% crit up, a 100% star generation, and a 20% defense down demerit, all for 3 turns on a 5-turn cooldown. This is an absolutely insane skill, and if you want to do a wild budget crit team, have a Caesar and a Matahari on the same team. You will be hemorrhaging stars. His NP is a single target quick that hits a whopping 10 times and comes with a very unique buff. It increases his buff success rate based on his current health, and increases his attack by 10% with an 80% success rate, and each time that hits, it goes again until you either miss or you proc 5 times, for a maximum 50% attack buff for the turn before damage. Then his NP hits for 2,400% damage. Alone at NP5, I believe that he has the strongest, or at least one of the strongest, single target NPs in the game. He hits like a truck. And then as a bonus, he makes free stars on top of all the others he makes just from his quick NP. In terms of raw damage, he is insane, while also offering a bit of team-wide support. He can be used as a crit support as well due to the power in his third skill. So he's incredibly versatile as a unit, as I've said prior. He should be your priority saber to level in the early game, and he will carry you through not just the early game, but a lot of the late game as well if you need a single target saber. Mind you, he becomes more of a support as the game progresses, as characters with more consistent damage pop up. This is the issue with Caesar. Outside of his NP damage, he's just fine. But even in the late game, he is still usable for his support capabilities and his massive NP. He would very much benefit from a buff to his Charisma or his Tactics, either with more stars in the form of a Star Bomb, or lean more into the crit support angle and give the party a crit damage up, or even increase the party's buff success rate. That'd be nice. He is a great unit, and I really hope that he gets a swimsuit, despite all the people who won't use him just because he's fat. Number 5 is my dear sweet Ushi Wakamaru. Possibly my most biased opinion on this list, but one that I can say that I am comfortable in. Ushi's claim to fame for a long time was being the only single target rider in the free-to-play gacha that was a DPS. George is a single target, but he is a tank. Mandricardo did come in and give her some competition for the slot, but Ushi still remains supreme. She is a DPS with support capabilities, and skills that flow amazingly well together. Her first skill is Tengu Art of War, which is a party-wide NP gain up for 20% and a personal quick up for 20%, both for 3 turns on a 5-turn cooldown. Her second skill is the 6 Arts of War, Thunder and Gale, which is a party-wide 20% attack up, a personal 50% crit up, both for 3 turns, with a 20-star Star Bomb, all on a 5-turn cooldown. Her third skill is Quick-Witted Swallow, which is an evade with a 100% star generation buff for her on a 6-turn cooldown. Her NP is an insanely powerful single-target quick hit with an overcharge effect of increasing her star generation up by 50% at minimum. Ushi is insane. I bring her to every single caster boss fight, and anytime I need someone to just break a bar of an enemy. She outputs unrivaled DPS in the rider class, while also being one of the most well-rounded servants in the game, period. She is easy to work around, plays nicely with most support units, and is perfect in every way. Her issue is this: though she offers a nice amount of support, it is mostly meant for others who are supporting her. The NP gain up is small and clearly meant for support units to help catch up on their NPs, as well as making it so that she can catch up on hers. Which brings us to our second issue. Her NP is devastating, and she can get back up rather quickly on her own. But in these in-between turns, her damage is just okay. I do not believe that Ushi needs another buff, but if possible, I would like them to take whatever buff they plan on giving Ku this year or next, and just giving it to her to make her more powerful. Like, I don't know, embrace the Tengu thing, and make it so that if she's on a mountain or forest, her evade skill becomes a protection from arrows one, and just call it Tengu's Play Art of the Swallow. Ushi is great. I love her dearly. Ushi, Ushi, Ushi. Next. Number 4 is the Machine Gong, Chen Gong himself. He is the king of budget buster supports, and a huge enabler of goofy comps. He is the premier berserker support, and rightfully so. But let's look into him. His first skill is Scapegoat, a targetable taunt that further reduces the enemy's crit chance by 30% on a 5-turn cooldown, perfect for keeping enemies away from your Zerkers. His second skill is Strategist Advice, which is a party-wide 10% NP up, a 24% defense up for 3 turns, and a 350 damage taken reduction for 3 turns, all on a 6-turn cooldown. Finally, his third skill is a targetable 50% buster up at worst for 1 turn. If used on a Berserker, it further gives them a 100% crit damage buff, a 3000 HP up for 1 turn on a 5-turn cooldown. Essentially, Chen Gong has a targetable mana burst that gives meth to Berserkers. It is incredibly powerful as an ability and combos well with Buster units, not just Zerkers, across all rarities. Aside from this, his other main selling point, and the one that most people use him for, is his Noble Phantasm. It is a unique AoE Arts NP that operates the exact same way as Arash's does, in that after the initial hit, an additional chunk of damage will occur with overcharge if the enemy survives. This requires the sacrifice of the leftmost servant in the party. Unlike Arash though, this can be prevented if that unit has guts. But the playstyle you ideally want with him is to use his NP to clear out the leftmost unit after it has expended its usefulness, that way you can bring in a fresh unit. In effect, this allows for a rather gruesome way to rotate through your units, allowing you to also put out more and more damage. Chen Gong is an enabler that allows for a unique and effective playstyle. However, his usefulness, while absolutely, undeniably powerful, is limited by how many units you bring. He works best with fragile units, namely Berserkers, who can fully utilize his potential and then exit the stage after the fact. His entire kit is all about extracting the full potential of your units and then removing them. It's hard to think of a way to buff a unit whose kit is perfect already, so honestly, all I can think of is like an NP upgrade so his damage is better. Number 3 is Asclepius. I love this unit. He is an absolutely astounding support and fulfills all the needs one may have or want out of a healing support. In fact, he is hands down the best white mage in the game. But let's examine his skills. His first skill is God of Medicine, an insane 5,000 HP heal coupled with a 50% debuff resist up for 3 turns on a 5-turn cooldown. His second skill is Son of Apollo, a 100% chance to steal one enemy's NP for 1 turn, and increases the party's NP generation rate by 30% for 3 turns, all on a 6-turn cooldown. His third skill is Ophiuchus, a party-wide 20% NP charge that also clears all debuffs on a 7-turn cooldown. His kit is like a Swiss Army knife of medicine and stalling. He boasts the skill set of a 5-star unit in a 3-stars body, but it gets better. His NP is an ally-wide guts that also gives a 1-time debuff immunity and a 1000 HP heal that will proc every turn for 3 turns at minimum. The name of the game of Asclepius is Survival. He is the most effective doctor in Chaldea, able to administer healing, NP generation, direct NP charge guts, and what have you. He is an all-around amazing support unit that you can honestly bring to any piece of content. This is why I've come to value him over more niche supports like Gong or Long. He is not bogged down by the need for a certain team comp to be great. He is just great on his own. He can enable countless teams and guide them down the path of immortality. He can single-handedly keep a team alive better than even some of the 5-star options. Like, I would be genuinely curious to see how he compares, but I will do the testing on that at another time. His one flaw is that while he can keep others alive, he neglects to take care of himself. He does not receive his NP's guts, which can be a problem in certain content. However, the easy way to alleviate that is to use him with other supports. He pairs extremely well with everyone that I have listed so far and will list in the future. Support, tank, DPS, all of them. His sheer versatility and usability is what makes him so powerful. How do you buff a character like this without breaking him more? Well, you can't, because he's already broken. What you do is you either add an additional effect on Son of Apollo, that has Sure Hit for example, or increase the heal rate of his overcharge. Crazier ideas would be to give him a guts ability or some actual hard survivability, but if you did that, he would legitimately become one of the best casters in the game and they would just remove Irie. Number 2 is the Golden Voice Shoda Hans Christian Andersen. This may come as a surprise to some as to how he is not number 1. He shares everything good I have said about Asclepius, but slightly better. He is able to fit into any team comp, but has a more usable niche than just healing. He is a crit support, and a very good one at that. Hans's first skill is Human Observation, a party-wide 3-turn 40% crit damage buff on a 5-turn cooldown. His second skill is Rapid Casting, a 75% NP battery that is on a 6-turn cooldown. His third skill is Little Mermaid's Love, a targetable buff that will charge the target's NP by 10% every turn for 3 turns, and make 15 stars every turn for 3 turns on a 5-turn cooldown. His NP is an 80% chance to proc a 20% buff to attack, defense, and star generation, with a guaranteed 1000 HP heal that will occur every turn for 3 turns at minimum, exactly like Asclepius's. Hans has been described as Waver Light, and I would agree with this. While he does have his specialization, that being as a crit support, every character in the game loves crits and direct NP charge, so he can be brought along to any fight and be incredibly usable. He is by far the best budget support for this reason. He is usable in pretty much every piece of FGO content. His one flaw is that his NP is not guaranteed to hit all of its buffs, so if he ever were to receive another buff, I would pray that it would be to his rapid casting, and it would increase his buff success rate. Mind you, despite his low hit counts, he has no trouble getting his NP back after using it, so honestly, even if you whiff once, you'll be able to try again soon enough. Level Hans, because he's worth it. Number 1, we have Ku. That's right, Ku is easily one of the best Lancers in the game, period. Not just budget Lancers, but Lancers in general. He is an absolutely insane character, and for good reason. Ku's claim to fame is that despite the memes and other Fate content, Lancer is not dead. Quite the opposite. You can't kill him. His kit is geared around survivability and then firing off his NP. His first skill is called Shoal of the Four Branches, and is a Guts skill that will res him with 2500 HP one time for 5 turns. and then also increases his attack by a formula of how much HP he has for 3 turns. The less HP he has, the harder he's going to hit. Exactly the same as Anne and Mary's overcharge effect. Essentially, the closer he is to death, the harder he starts swinging. Also, this skill is on a low 6-turn cooldown, which is kind of crazy for a personal gut skill. His second skill is the ever-coveted protection from arrows, a permanent 3 times evade that also increases his defense by 16% for 3 turns, all on a low 5-turn cooldown. You can use this skill, and if you avoid being hit for 5 turns, can have it again and guarantee to avoid 2 turns of damage. It is incredibly broken. His third skill is Disengage, a 1500 HP heal that also removes all of his debuffs on a 5-turn cooldown. As you can tell, his skills are heavily slanted towards defense, but that does not mean that he lacks in the offense department. His NP is an insanely hard-hitting single-target quick NP that ignores evasion, reduces their defense by 10% for 3 turns at minimum, and also has a 60% chance to instant kill at minimum. That last part can honestly be forgotten because it never shows up. He gets his NP relatively quickly, fires it off for insane damage, and then goes back to what he was doing. In a bad spot because of dots? Disengage. Enemy NP coming? Evade it. Out of that? Survive with the guts. He is unkillable. He is an all-around amazing unit with few flaws to point out. The main one thing is that he really enjoys crits, but has a little bit of trouble gathering them. But not enough to warrant a buff. I bring Ku as a single target Lancer to most content that requires it because he can keep pace with my only 5-star Lancer, Enkidu, who is also a survival master of a servant that puts out insane damage. Genuinely, I am hard-pressed to think of a way to make Ku better outside of either giving him a stars or a crit damage buff. He has remained not just consistently usable, but powerful since his inception. I am more than comfortable saying that among the budget units, he is the best of the best. But that is it. Thank you all so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. Let me know what you thought down in the comments. Like the videos, it really does help out the channel. If you want, I will also be doing the 4 and the 5-star units for this series. Let me know who you think deserves to be on that list down there as well. Subscribe to catch these as they go up. Follow my Twitch for significantly less structured content. I also have a Twitter, but for now, keep your chin up. Peace.